Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have an opportunity to work on a reel that was previewed earlier. This is the Bass Pro Qualifier. It's a reel that's sold at Bass Pro shops. And oftentimes I get asked, what do I think of their reels? I think their reels are decent. I think a lot of them are a good value for the price paid. They all seem to be well engineered. Of course, Bass Pro doesn't make their own reels. They go to job shops or contract manufacturers, if you will. But a lot of times those shops are the same ones making reels for other brands, and most of the time the design is dependable. So what's the downside of the Bass Pro Shop reels? Well, the downside typically is that you can't find parts for them once the reel goes out of warranty, and you can't find service. So with that being said, let's take a look at this one. It's a low profile bait caster. The model is the, I believe, PQX 10 HD. It's a high-speed reel. Everything I've tested so far seems to work on the reel, which is always a good thing. And well, we'll just kind of see how we can make this thing work. So we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces. I've removed that first screw, and we should be able to just kind of get this cap off. And while I'm taking off the exterior pieces and parts, I want to recommend that you go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you like the art of reel repair, if you like to understand how fishing reels are made, and if you enjoy just kind of seeing them take apart, how to service them and put them back together. And maybe you just maybe you have a couple of reels and you're just interested in the process that you do to fix them. Well, subscribing to them is going to give you insight into all of that. And hey, I may even cover your reel. I have a lot of reels in the library, and yours may be in there if you're looking to service it. So go ahead and do a YouTube search as well, and you'll see over 1,000 videos that have been posted. And there's a good likelihood that your reel is covered in there, or one similar to your reel is covered in there, if it's not yours exactly. Okay, well, we've taken off the handle and some pieces and parts. All of those pieces and parts go into a parts tray. It's the bottom of a fast food container, and I put those there so that I can know where to look for them when it's time to reinstall. All right, this one says it's a 7-ball bearing system. That's a nice quantity amount of these. And I noticed when I was spinning them that they spin very freely. I'm going to remove this star adjuster. That comes off in a counterclockwise mounter. That's your little noise maker. There's a couple of shim washers on top of that, and it's important to notice where those locations are so that when you reinstall it properly. That'll go into my parts tray. Underneath we have a collar and an instant anti-reverse. We have a couple of mounting screws, and we have a little pull pin here that's going to release the side plate. And we're going to do that next because with only 2 screws in here, there's a fairly safe bet that there's another screw under the spool that's holding this in. Well, maybe not. It might be that it's just right here, but let's go ahead and do that anyway. Grab your pull pin and pull it out. That should release your side plate. And the only question generally is, does the side plate release up or release down? And then it releases up, just a quarter of a turn. You can see I've pulled out the pin, and that's released the side plate. This is a mag drive. The mag is clean. There is a bearing in here, one of the 7, I guess, so we're going to oil that bearing. Just set that off to the side. Now we're going to remove the spool. That spool has another bearing on it, so let's do the same thing. I'm using fishing reel oil to oil those bearings, and as I kind of suspected, there is another screw in the case, so that's going to have to be removed in order to get that side plate off. When you're working on these, you want to take precautions. You want to make sure that you don't force anything. If you didn't know that that screw was there, for example, and you couldn't release the side plate and just decided, well, I'll get a bigger hammer, if you will, that could prove injurious to the reel, and it could be the end of what you're trying to do. So please, if you find that it's not working right, take your time, take a breath, and just kind of recalibrate. Notice that there's two different size screws here. The small screw is over here. The longer screw is the one under the case there. And now we have two more screws on this side. So I always take the time to check out which is which. And looks like we even have a third screw now. We have a third screw that's holding that case on that has a different thread. And I always wonder about this when you think about simplicity in manufacture. How many times do they have to change their tool because they have different threads or different screw sizes to assemble? Well, we got 4 different screws and 4 different holes. Go figure that one out. So the long screw with the fine thread is here. The short fine thread is here. The long rough thread is inside. The short rough thread is below. I think that wins an award. 4 screws and 4 different sizes. And folks wonder why I take the time to put those out. All right, that should release the side plate now. And remember, we had that little push pin bar there, so that's going to come out on this. The inside of the reel is very clean. We're just going to use a towel just to clean up any residual dirt and dust and the like. There's a little bit of it here. And there's a third bearing is here. I don't normally count them all, but there's another bearing there, so I will oil that and set that off to the side. And then before you go any further in this cleaning exercise, make sure you remove these 2 springs here. They're yoke springs. They're going to hold the yoke to the case, and they're going to return it when you go out of free spool. If you lose those, well, you're in for some fun trying to find them, particularly in a reel like this where you don't know if you're ever going to get the replacement parts. We have a collar. We have the anti-reverses next. We can remove those. We have the main gear and the drag washers. That can come off. We have the yoke and the pinion gear. That would be next. And then for the most part, you don't remove the rest of this unless there's a need to from a breakage standpoint, but you do want to make sure it's cleaned. And what we're going to do here is we're going to just kind of hose down the top to clean that. I am going to remove the gear shaft. The gear shaft is held on by 2 screws, and you want to get under there because there's likely bearing number 4 is under that. I'm just going to leave these parts on the table. I will come back to them shortly. If you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, and you would like maybe you're trying to find some information on something, maybe where a part can be found, maybe a little bit more information on the reel or the like, go ahead and leave that in the comments section. I will try and get you an answer for your question. I think we have to remove this carrier in order to get that. It looks like this free spool trip lever here is independent of this carrier up top. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to hold my finger on this. There's a spring load here, and I'm just hoping that maybe this piece by itself can come out without disturbing that secondary piece. Probably not. That's not the way it generally works, but we'll see. I'm going to use a little wedge here. Well, I see we have a secondary spring here, so we're going to have to remove that spring. Just going to try and find my small pliers for that. And this is a good place to tell you take pictures along the way, because if you don't know where, if you don't take a reference point picture, and I'm taking videos, but if you don't take a reference point picture, for example, when you detach that spring, you're not going to know where it goes back to, and it can lead to some fun and games, if you will. All right, we're going to try again to see if we can't lever this out now. Well, as it turns out, we did change a little bit of this, but that's okay. There's nothing behind there that needed to be cleaned. They're in terrible disrepair, but we'll kind of work backwards on this one. Now I wanted to remove this is the whole idea behind removing this. And we do have a bearing under here, so I did want to clean that, and I did want to get this oiled. Then we can go right back together with this one. Now there's some play in this shaft here. I think that's just general wear from over time, and there's really not much you can do with that. Okay, well, I just went on one of those unplanned adventures. I removed the screws to service this, cleaned that up, and sure enough, this assembly just shot off. Well, there's two springs here. There's one on this side and one on the other side, and they decided they were going to go have a life of their own, and it took me a little while to get this right again. I'm not going to take it apart to show you how that was done, but let's just talk a little bit about it. This black assembly here has a ring that fits over a collar. There's two studs on the bottom of that fit in these two stud holes right here. You may or may not be able to see that. The white carrier is next. The white carrier has a pivot point for the firearm for the free spool, and it also has the ramps on it for your yoke. And then there's a return spring over on this side. Well, that was a little culprit there that just decided it wanted to push rather than pull, and I can tell you that taking the pictures was immeasurable in getting me back on track with this one. Okay, I started to reassemble a reel, and I realized that I did not service this pawl mechanism, and you have to remove the shield in order to do that. So I've just backed off the pieces that have been cleaned and ready for reassembly. There's two screws, one on each side, that's holding a plastic cover here. So you want to get those screws off. Those are Phillips head screws, and I'm going to leave them right on my bench. One's smaller than the other, so note which side the smaller one came from. Now you can remove that bezel, and you can get to the cover for the line guide pawl. This is a plastic piece, so be careful when removing, when threading, and when reinstalling. I just tap that gently to free the pool on the pawl. I want to bring that pawl out and inspect. I'm trying to grab it with the pliers. Sometimes you can knock it out completely. Sometimes, well, it's a little tougher. There we go. And the pawl always gets dirty. People seem to think that if you just throw grease on it, it's okay. These shoulders accumulate dirt, and that's hard to see, and it's not much, but it will impact the performance of the reel. So take your time when you're servicing a reel to pull this pawl, inspect the tips, make sure that the shoulders are clean, and then you can reinstall. I'm going to throw a little bit of oil in here before I reinsert the pawl. That's just to make sure that the pawl turns free and easily when it rides on there. We're going to grab the oil gun one more time and just push down on the pawl while you turn your shaft, and that's going to seat the pawl properly. Hand thread the plastic cap. That way you can assure yourself that you're not over tightening. And then just a quarter of a turn. Don't go crazy. Oops. That oops says that there's a little metal button that goes on top of the pawl. It's right here. That somehow fell off the pawl of the cap. So let's go do this again. It's one of the beauties of having a parts tray. You always know what's going on. Look at that, it's moving smooth now. All right, now we can take the shield, put that back on. Remember what side's where. The biggest screw goes on the internal side of the gear. Clamp that down. is the smaller piece. Those of you that know me know me and small screws don't necessarily play well together all the time. There you go. Okay, now let's complete the rest of this. I've already oiled and greased this. As I mentioned, I started the assembly on it and got stuck along the way with forgetting to do that line guide. There's a ramp on the back of the yoke that faces internal. There's a slot on the back of the pinion gear that faces inside. You know you have a nice seating on this when that one corner fits right into that trip lever. Next up then is the main gear. And again, I've done this once before, but we'll do it anyway. Here's your your click that's going to shoot the trip mechanism back up. It's got angles on it. The angles face towards the dog, which is going to be released for the free spool. And there's two squared shoulders on your post, so you need to make sure that those sit into the square shoulders. There's a cap washer that goes on top of that. Then your drag stack. We've inspected the teeth on the main gear. We made sure it's all clean. This is tarnished, but not pitting or anything. And we've re-greased this with fishing wheel oil, and then we can seat that. Your washers are Teflon washers. They do not get any lubrication. They're self-lubricating by its nature. Next up, so you put your first round one in, which is called the keyed one. Your next up then is the middle washer. The middle washer on these drag stacks is always going to be the metal eared washer. It's got a circle in the front or in the center. It's got two prongs that stick out of it, sometimes called ears. They embed themselves into the main gear. Your last part of your washer set. This one's called a belled washer. It's flat on the bottom to hold the tension onto the drag stack, and it's got a hump on the top. The hump faces out. Then we go with the collar for our anti-reverse clutch. On top of that collar there's a little bearing shield. Well, let's put the anti-reverse clutch. You do not oil the anti-reverse clutch. I've cleaned it. That's all you do. This is a friction device. If you put oil on there, well, it's going to eliminate the friction. It's going to compromise its effectiveness. All right. We've oiled the bearing in the back. Gotta be a little bit careful here. You don't want to jump this drag stack where you knock that click ratchet off the base, and just kind of center your post. That's your trip mechanism for your free spool. And then if you're not lining up with that anti-reverse clutch, just turn it a little bit, and that'll make that work. Nothing to worry about here. This is an oil port, and this is where that last screw comes in. If you weren't paying attention, that was a small rough threaded screw. We'll put that back in when we go to put the rest on. Well, I looked at my parts tray. I just noticed I missed something. I just missed installing the two yoke springs. So we'll do this again for your information. I'm going to put the two small springs on there, and we'll do it again. Line up the stacks. And you know you're good if you have a nice flush seam here without any gaps, and you're not forcing anything in terms of the cover plate for it. All right. Remember what we have. We have 4 unique screws, 2 shorts, 2 longs, rough thread, and fine thread. So let's start with the fine threaded ones. They go in the front here. Put this one down first to hold that in place. And we're going to take the other fine thread, put it on the bottom. Now we can take that oil port. I'm going to install the cover correctly. That's some piece that just fell out there. And that takes the smaller, coarse threaded one. Well, that leaves one screw, and for those of us that were paying attention, that screw belongs inside the spool case. Again, I always wonder when I see something like this what the designers were thinking about and how many tools you had to change to make this work. Okay, we've oiled the bearing on the spool. We can put a little bit of grease onto the spool shaft. That'll make it run easy inside the pinion gear. A little bit on the back, but be careful there. That's your magnetic brake assembly. So don't get that all smeared up there. Let's go ahead and put that in. We can take our side case now. Get that positioned properly, and you want to pull that stud out. Rotate that down, then let that stud go back in, and that's your reel. Okay, we've just got a little bit left here. I want to thank those of you that are still around for it, and I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel for everything that they're doing to keep us safe. All right, we have a shim washer next. Shim washer. It's the case. There we go. The case piece comes on. These are 2 tension washers. Those follow. They're not flat washers. Don't attempt to flatten them. Then you have one more flat washer inside the star adjuster here. It just didn't come out when we were... Oh, we have a piece of grease in there. All right. That goes on next. And as you're putting this on, if you don't compress that clicker, then just stop for a moment and eventually you will get it. There we go. Once you've installed that star adjuster, then you have that little tension washer that goes underneath the handle. Then our handle. Then the handle nut. And you're going to have to align this handle nut to make sure that you can get that cover on. And generally, if you leave your square side of one of the pieces of the handle perpendicular to the hole, then your handle and nut cap will seat pretty easily and align to the hole, and I'm almost there. I'll back it off. I over tightened it just a slight bit. That should do it. There you go. Got the good alignment. Just grab that nut. It'll be time for a test here. So this one was a little interesting. It gave us that additional challenge there when I removed that internal trip assembly, but I think we got it all back together again, thanks to the pictures and a little patience. Let's see what we got. All right, well, first thing we got is a nice turning reel that's a lot smoother than when I started. Let's make sure that that trip mechanism is working. We spent a lot of time on that. Got a beautiful casting reel. Now the telling point, does it trip back? Well, it sure does. All right, well, that's it. That's your Bass Pro Qualifier. I think that the other ball bearings are a mystery to me. 7, I'm going to guess I probably have them in the handle. And that would be 2. I'm still missing 1. Oh, well, what are you going to do? It's out there somewhere. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed that. To everybody who's still watching, thank you. And to all, please stay safe, stay well, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.